But it's my pleasure to welcome you back, and I really hope you're enjoying the series. What Vadim has been sharing with you is the reference book that he uses. Most people would describe it as a book that you probably don't read or you shouldn't read. But it's actually a history book, isn't it? It's a history of people who have lived earlier in this civilized world, and they've recorded their history. And if we want to understand what's gone on in the past, we should use the reference book for history as well as for other reasons. But it is a history book. So I hope you enjoy the series. And so one last thing I need to tell you. Wednesday night we're in here again. Friday there's a wedding in here, so we'll be in the Old Shire offices where we were on Saturday. And Saturday we're in the Old Shire offices, but next week, the last week, Monday, Wednesday and Friday we'll be in here. And that. So there's 10 programs in total. All right? It's a very condensed 2 weeks, but I think most people like to sort of do it quickly and enjoy it and finished, and then we can move on to other things. All right? So thank you very much, and great pleasure in welcoming Vadim.
Well, good evening, young people. It's a delight for me to meet with most of you for the third time. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Vadim. I'm a PhD student in history, and I've taught in a number of universities in the United States of America, Australia, and Europe in the past. And it's a pleasure for me once in a while to teach or to run just public community educational seminars like this, apart from my other duties. And Peter Hughes, who is the very charming organizer, coming with this wondrous Australia on the top of the world concept, he invited me to come to Dramana because he helps the local community a lot. He's a wonderful person. And when he called me and said, Vadim, could you come to Dramana Community Hall and run an educational seminar for the community? I said, it will be my greatest pleasure. Just for you who are here for the first time, please grab this piece of paper with the outline of all our lectures and the location of our programs. We are running these seminars, as Peter said, on this compound, on these grounds, but there are 2 halls. This one, a very nice one, and the bigger one, and just 20 meters, just footpath away from us. There is the small Old Shire offices. So some meetings will be in this hall, some meetings will be in that hall. Most of them will be here. So this timetable shows you precisely where that is happening. Also, we're giving away some books. In the past, when people came to my educational programs, we used to give them big books, and some people complain, oh, I have so much to read. So I said, okay, next time I'll give you smaller books, which are very easy to read and consume. So there's the first book which we're giving to all those who come. It's called Signs of Hope. There is the second book which we'll give to everybody this coming Wednesday, a day after tomorrow. And also, I'm sorry, I said 24, it's actually 14 DVDs. You see this beautiful set? It's a set of 14 documentaries on history, archaeology, ancient predictions, and many other things. It was a multi-million-dollar worldwide project filmed in Europe and in the Middle East and in Australia, even in Australian mines, in Australian jails. It went everywhere. It's a very fascinating documentary, a 14-part series, which is very nice. And next week we are going to give it to everyone who keeps coming regularly to these programs. Okay? And if I have more presents, if I like you more, I'll give you more. Okay? So Peter, could you please take this and hide, because this is very valuable. I don't want it to walk away by itself. But we are really delighted to have you come to these seminars. And also, for those who have questions, in the lobby There are little pieces where you can find pieces of paper where you can write down your questions. I like questions which are sharp, provocative, and challenging. And the more difficult the question is, the more I delight. I'll endeavor to answer most of your questions. But if there is a question to which I don't know an answer, I'll honestly admit that, and I'll tell you that question is beyond my expertise. For instance, if you ask me something about, say, the history of ancient Rome, I'll be able to give you a lot of answers. But if you ask me a question, who do you think will be the next Prime Minister of Australia, I won't be able to give you an answer to that question. That is beyond my giftedness, okay? Also, Peter talked about Australia, how nice Australia is. And those who are a little bit delayed, come and take the seats. We are going to bring you extras if necessary. Let me tell you, when people ask me, who are you? Who are you? Because people get confused when they meet me. In shops and supermarkets, whenever people find me and hear me talk, they hear an accent, and they most often ask me, "Are you a South African?" I don't know why, but in Australia, so many people think I'm from South Africa. Well, I've never been to South Africa before. I come from Russia and its coldest part, Siberia. But I and my family have lived in Australia now for many years, and we've got naturalized a number of years ago. My children grew up in Australia. They're fully Aussie. They're the ones who do not have any accent. And my dream that one day my children will swim for the Australian national team. I love swimming myself. When people ask me, what is your biggest hobby? I tell them I love swimming. And in actual fact, when I lived in Europe, I loved crossing European rivers. It was my collection. Some people collect stamps, some people collect coins, some people collect books. I collected rivers. My goal was to cross the rivers, swim across the rivers. And I used to swim across mountain rivers, across some of Europe's and some of Asia's biggest rivers, in spite of the fast currents and streams, cold waters, warm waters. But when I arrived in Australia, I started swimming across different bays until I saw a shark. And my collection had to come to a halt because I realized that if I start collecting, Australia doesn't have a lot of rivers to cross, but if I collect the bays, beautiful oceanic bays in Australia, one day I'll become food. So I prefer to swim now only in safe places in the country and also in the swimming pools. That's where I take my distances. But my children, I put them in the pool as much as possible. They participate in competitions all the time. And my dream that one day my children will be able to say thank you to this hospitable country and swim for this country at a high level and even win some medals for this country. That is my dream for my little boys. And I believe that one day it'll happen. But when people ask me a question, Vadim, when you moved to Australia a number of years ago, did you have a cultural shock? I keep telling everybody I had a cultural surprise. I felt as if I moved home. I am a Siberian by birth. Now, Siberia is a vast frozen land which occupies most of the Asian part of Russia, of my homeland. And now I see so many parallels between the place where I was born and Australia that I think Australia is just a country with a different language. Let me give you some comparisons. Australia was a convict land for the Queen. Okay, they used to send convicts to Australia. Siberia was a convict land for the Russian Tsars. That's where they sent the Russian convicts. By the way, I'm of a convict background. Both of my great-grandfathers and their families were exiled to Siberia over 100 years ago during the days of Joseph Stalin. And when people look at Australia, it's a huge continent, very little population. Siberia is huge land mass, little population. Australia has a lot of natural resources. Siberia is the money pocket of the country. It has all the natural resources. Now, Australians have a unique character. Australians are very nice and helpful people. For instance, unlike many other countries, Australians, they help their community a lot. So if somebody is moving, a neighbor, Australians will come and help that person. When there's floods in Queensland, many Australians will get in their cars without even asking if they're needed there or not, and they'll just drive to Queensland and help people who are in need. Australians are people with a very kind heart. And globally, Australians, they have a very positive name. You will unlikely find any country on the globe where people do not like Australians. But Australians are very likable, lovable, and loving people. They're really nice. Well, Siberians are very much the same. Siberians are like people from a different place, from a different planet. They're also very helpful. The severity of climate, the cold, it all prompts the people to be helpful, help their friends. And in times past, when credit cards did not exist, often in Moscow, in the airport, you would find a line of people lining to buy tickets for a flight to northern Siberia. And somebody would come and say, folks, I'm flying to that city and I live in that city. Can you please lend me some money? I don't have enough money to buy a ticket to that city. My wife will reimburse you when we come to the airport. And you would find that most people in the line would get a collection, get enough money for the ticket, buy him a ticket, fly that person to the same city on the same plane, and his wife would meet them at the airport, and she would prepare all the money, divide it in parts, and give it back to all the passengers of that plane who lended money to this poor passenger who did not have money to fly. So they were very helpful, very much like Australians. And Australians hate hierarchy. In Australia, you don't like hierarchy. Everybody is equal. So if it's a prime minister, just good day, Malcolm, that's it. Australians, they wouldn't put a big red carpet before a government official. And Siberians are very much like Australians. They hate hierarchies and they just like the simplicity and the openness of relationships. Australians, probably having the convict background, they have what they call the tall poppy syndrome. Because it comes from the convict mentality that in the prison camp you can't be too big, you can't be too small, you can't be too smart, you can't be too stupid. You need to be a little bit like everybody else. So it's a very positive thing, because in Australia, if you're a millionaire, you need to try to show everybody that you're not a millionaire. You need to look humble and you need to look simple. You don't show extravagancy, because extravagancy will be disliked in the Australian circles, generally speaking. Siberians are very much the same. So when people ask me, Vadim, when you moved to Australia, did you have a cultural shock? I'm telling everybody I have found so many parallels that I think there are two sister geographical areas in the world. It's Siberia and Australia. The people who live in those lands are very similar to each other. So I find it extremely comfortable and extremely easy to live in Australia and deal with Australian people. But there's something in Australia which is standing out. Australians as a nation, I find to be possibly the most honest nation in the world. One of the least corrupt. And honesty is a value which is so badly missed in so many parts around the world. But Australians, generally speaking, are a very honest people. And that's what really makes me appreciate the Australians, because they're very genuine, they're very sincere. They'll tell you in the face what they think about you. They will not flatter. So Australians are really nice, and I really like Australians. So this after this lengthy introduction, let me take you to the main journey. To our main program, and we've entitled it Visitors from Where? From Other Worlds. So I'm going to take for this program exactly 50 minutes, and for those who were not here last Friday or on Saturday, let me tell you about our previous programs. So for the first time we met here, we discussed the topic loneliness. Is there a way out? We spoke about the problem of negative emotions in our modern society, and the fact that loneliness, fear and guilt, depression, all kinds of psychiatric and psychological disorders are becoming more and more prevalent in the big cities in the Western world. And we mentioned about a possibility of the supernatural, because for many people this world is just natural. But as Isaac Newton said, if you drink from the cup of science, with the first drink you'll become an atheist, but on the bottom of that cup you will find God. If you look at the vastness of space, at the splendor of the universe, at the numbers of stars, the speed with which they're traveling, at all the cosmic distances and the perfect order, at the laws of heavenly mechanics, that all prompts human beings to believe that there must be the first reason which brought the universe into existence. There must be something before the universe ever began. And that must be something very intelligent and extremely powerful, which out of the big forces of energy created matter and this entire universe. If you explore in depth the world of nature around us, the flora, the world of plants, the fauna, the world of animals, and even us humans, you may come to a conclusion that life could not have produced itself. Out of nothing, in the complete absence of mind, out of vacuum, a living being cannot appear. So there must be a maker, a creator. So at the first program, I gave you a suggestion that human beings are not just highly organized animals, and they're definitely not a cosmic accident. Human beings are a creation. And I suggested that loneliness and many negative emotions could be resolved if people restore relationships, not only with the world of nature and among themselves, but also on the vertical scale. There's a vertical link. If they restore their relationship with the Creator, they could get peace in their minds. Now acquaint yourself with Him and be at peace. Thereby good will come to you. So at our first program we mentioned that if people learn the plan of the Creator about their lives, they'll receive peace and liberty and freedom from their negative emotions, including loneliness. We're not alone in the universe. There is a Creator who has a plan for our lives, for yours and mine, and who is immensely interested in you and me. Our program on Saturday was talking about the ancient king's dream. So you remember, 2,600 years ago, in the ancient city of what? Babylon, there lived a king by the name of Nebuchadnezzar. Thank you. And he saw a dream with a big metal man with golden head, chest of silver, thighs of bronze or brass, legs of iron and feet of iron and clay. And you remember that Daniel said that it was not just a dream, it was predicting the future. And Daniel pointed to the beginning point in prophecy, that Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom, Babylon, was the head of gold. And if you start with Babylon and you look at all the empires which followed Babylonia, you will come to a conclusion that there was Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the Roman Empire divided into many little parts. We're living in a divided world, and all of that will be succeeded by a giant stone, which will be a radical, catastrophic, but yet positive change in the history of mankind when God will intervene and bring His era and bring His golden age to mankind. Well, a lot of people ask a question. Well, thank you very much. You said that it is possible, even from the world of science, to conclude that the Creator must exist. Well, you pointed to the fact that the Bible, the ancient Jewish Bible, could be a historically reliable document. You point us to the prophecies where you mentioned that the deity predicted the future thousands of years ago. But a question remains. And that was the question which I was asking myself as a child when I was growing up in the former Soviet Union. I still remember when I was a little boy, when my mom came home crying bitterly. And I said, "What happened?" And she said, "Vadim, I don't have words. A big tragedy has just happened. My father's cousin, her daughter, my aunt, my uncle, and the sister of my grandma were killed on that day in a car accident. They were driving in a car, and something happened that they had a head-on collision with a big truck, and they all died in an instant." I remember going to that funeral, only a little boy, and I was wondering, why did it happen? That little girl who died in that accident, she was the same age as I was, and I used to play with her every week. We used to meet, and I used to tell, though she was my second cousin, I used to tell my mom, "I'm going to marry her. I like her so much." My mom said, "But you don't normally marry cousins." I said, "But she's so good, I'm going to marry my cousin." I liked her so much, and there she was lying in a coffin. And I was asking myself a question. If God exists, if He's there, why is it that there's so much suffering in the world? Have you ever asked yourselves this question? Well, that's the biggest question of an atheist. And I, as an atheist, every time somebody would tell me, there must be a God, I would tell them, well, if He's there, why does He tolerate this? Why did He permit the tortures of the Inquisition when in His own name people killed 100 million people in the Middle Ages? How could He allow the Second World War with tens of millions of people die in Europe and around the world? If He exists, And if he loves this world, if he's compassionate about us, why does he permit suffering? And this is a very sharp and acute question. And it becomes even greater and more acute when suffering knocks on the door of your house, when you lose a loved one, when you see a tragedy happening, when a little child dies of cancer, of leukemia, or something else. Well, this evening we'll try to give an answer to this question. And we're going to consider a topic: visitors from other worlds. Firstly, let me discuss with you the items which will give a background for our topic. Now, what is the probability of life existing on other planets? What do you think? Is there a probability? Could life exist on other planets? So let's say we take the Milky Way system. Now, the Milky Way system is the galaxy in which we live. And let's say that in the entire Milky Way system, where you have 100 billion stars, only one star has a planet, like Earth. So let's say in the entire Milky Way system, only our planet, planet Earth, is inhabited and has life. So let's say there's one inhabited world per galaxy. Now, in the universe, in the vastness of the universe, there are millions of galaxies. So even if there was only one inhabited world in one galaxy, it means that there would be what? Millions of inhabited worlds. So most astronomers will tell you that the probability of life in other worlds is very, very high. Okay? And I have no doubts that, and today when astronomers look into the telescopes, they see, we see a planet, or we see a star and some planets around it, somewhere in the vastness of space, and they are at the same distance as planet Earth from the sun. So there could be circumstances and there could be conditions which would enable life to exist on that planet. So astronomers all agree we're not alone in the universe. There must be life in other galaxies. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two. People often ask a question: can you please explain to us the phenomena of the UFO? What is that? Unidentified flying objects. Okay. Now, where do the UFOs come from? And also people often point to the ancient civilizations and ask ourselves a question: how could people in those days and ages build such gigantic structures like the Egyptian pyramids? Even today, the architects cannot give the final explanation of how the pyramids were actually built. Herodotus, we just have the history of Herodotus, of the Greek historian, who says that to build the Great Pyramid it took 30 years. It took 10 years to build the road and 20 years to build the pyramid. But the mechanism, the structure is still unknown. When you go to South America and visit Peru, for instance, and you visit the civilizations of ancient Incas, and in Mid-America of Mayas, and you look at the giant boulders which are capable only for a big crane to lift. Not even some cranes can lift those boulders, but they're shaped and carved and they are lifted up on high mountains. How could people, in the absence of modern technology, bring such gigantic stones up to the mountains? And so some people think that aliens must exist and aliens must have visited this planet and helped the ancient civilizations build those structures. Well, the phenomena of UFO comes to us from an English novelist by the name of Herbert Wells. Now, have you ever heard about his novel called The War of the Worlds, or The Invisible Man, and many others? So Wells, in his novels, he describes the Martians, he describes those cosmic crafts coming down to this world. They look a little bit like octopus. They have lasers. They burn people. They use people as fuel and food. But then they all die because of earthly bacteria. It's a horror story. The War of the Worlds by Herbert Wells is a horror story. But it's interesting enough to notice that soon after the novelists started talking about a possibility of aliens, people started seeing the UFOs. In America, in Russia, in Australia, all over the world. So though some UFOs were just balloons or some man-made structures, and they were disclaimed to be UFOs, there are some films and there are some photographs which we can't ignore, which were not photoshopped, which we must admit describe something unknown. So today, even the worst skeptic and the worst critic will agree that there are some videos and some photographs which cannot be explained by normal human logic. And for that reason, there is a possibility that these UFOs could be aliens. So that's point number 2. Point number 3. Have you ever seen the film by the name of Matrix? Okay, Matrix. It talks about an age when the computers took over human beings. So the human beings developed their computers, and they developed them so perfectly that the computers decided, now we'll use human beings to serve us. Because in the past, human beings said, we'll use the computers to serve us. Now the computers are using human beings as fuel. So there are 2 dimensions. There's a dimension which is called the reality, and there is the computer reality. And most of our children who play computer games, they plunge themselves into a computer reality. So there is the concept of several realities. That this reality in which we live here on Mornington Peninsula, on planet Earth, is not the only reality. There could be parallel realities, not just this world, but parallel worlds. Have you heard about the concept of parallel worlds? Okay, so there is a possibility for a parallel world to exist. So it's another important concept for us to notice. So number 1. Physics are telling us and astronomers are telling us we're not alone in the universe. There are beings on other planets. Number 2, we can't ignore the fact that some photographs and some videos of unidentified flying objects cannot be explained by modern scientists. They cannot prove that they were photoshopped, and at the same time they can't explain them. So there is a possibility that these flying objects could be some form of aliens, some strange structures. Number 3, there is a possibility for the existence of parallel realities. And number 4, my last point. In times past, people who wrote sacred books, you go to the Asian countries and you find Buddhism. Now, in Buddhism, they have a collection of sacred books which they call the 3 baskets, or Tripitaka. And in those collections, they mention about the existence of supernatural beings which would come and communicate with human beings. If you go to the Middle East and you take Islam, every Muslim will tell you that Muhammad, the Prophet, received his book, the Quran, from an angel. So they believe that it was given to human beings from a different world. It was a messenger. And people used to describe those messages in cartoonish, fairy tale-like descriptions, but they believe it was a supernatural revelation. If you go to Israel and talk to the Jewish people, they'll tell you that they received the Bible from God. It was a message from a different world. It was a supernatural revelation. If you go to if you travel, say, to the countries of North, Mid and South America and look at the fairy tales, at the folk stories, and go all over the world, you will find countless accounts when human beings said that what I heard and what I received and what I recorded was actually information from a different world. And most of them refer to bright beings, to supernatural beings who appeared and spoke to them. So there is a possibility of people in times past, in ages past, of actually physically communicating with supernatural beings. It is impossible to believe that all of those people were hypnotized or all those people just made up those stories. There are literally tens of thousands of experiences, stories, and some of those stories are even put together in books which talk about those supernatural appearances. So there is a possibility of human beings in the past communicating with beings from other worlds. So this is a preface, and now let us look at this Jewish book and look at the way the Jewish people described their experience in times past. So today we're having a lot of suffering in the world. We have a nuclear threat. We have revolutions and revolts. We have all kinds of wars and disasters. We have the problem of terrorism. We have a collapse of human families. We have all kinds of issues today. And even in the most prosperous societies like Australia, New Zealand, Scandinavian countries, people cannot avoid the issue of suffering. And today we'll ask the Jewish book, why is there so much suffering? Let's look at the way the ancient Jewish people used to describe this. So the Bible authors, they said that in this world there is a big battle. There's a battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And this battle is ongoing. God, who made the universe, the Jewish Bible says, makes a statement. I have loved you with an everlasting what? Love. Therefore I have continued my faithfulness to you. So God in the Bible says that he loves human beings with everlasting love. But at the same time, he is the one who created the perfect world, has a foe, has an enemy, that is Satan or devil, who does all the bad things in this world and often casts all the blame at God. And the question arises, where does he, the foe, the adversary, come from? Well, 2,000 years ago, a very well-known Jewish rabbi, Jesus Christ, said, I saw Satan fall like lightning from where? From heaven. So Satan, the originator of human suffering, is called in the Bible, fall from heaven. So evil and suffering does not originate on this planet. It comes to us from somewhere else, from the universe, or even from a parallel world. And to understand the origin of suffering, we need to understand the way we are all made. Now, I am a creationist. In the world of science, there are two types of scientists. There are creationists, and they're the ones who believe in the existence of the Creator. And there are evolutionary scientists. They're the ones who believe that the world appeared by a blind chance and evolutionized and developed gradually. I do not deny evolution as such. I deny macroevolution. I deny the fact that a monkey could become a human being. But I accept microevolution. I accept that human beings could change. Some human beings have dark skin color, others have yellowish skin color, others have freckles, others have red hair, some people have black hair, some are blondish. We're all different, so we could have microscopic changes in the appearance or height or weight, make adjustments to the world in which we live, but at the same time I don't believe in macroevolution, that a human being one day will become someone else, will become a dragon or so. We do not observe the evolution transition from one kind to another in this world. Well, I am a creationist. I believe that this universe appeared because of a supernatural action of the Creator. Now, the Creator, when he populates the universe, and by the way, the Jewish people 2,000 years ago, when they recorded this, they actually wrote on many occasions that there are beings, even people, they said, in other worlds. So the Jewish Bible says that we're not alone in the universe. There are beings in other worlds. And the question is, who are human beings? What is your nature? Well, human beings, according to this book, are made in the image and likeness of God. They are different from the worlds of from the world of animals and plants. Now, the animals, they are driven by instincts and reflexes. And animals and humans are different because human beings have an intellect and human beings have a freedom of choice. We can actually choose things. The animals do not have the same capacity as human beings. They do not have the freedom of choice, and they are mostly driven by reflexes and instincts. Human beings have intellect and human beings have a freedom to choose. In this context, we're also different from the world of computers, because if you take a computer is a robot. You press A, and then you see A on the computer. You press B, and you press B, and you see B on the screen. We're not like a car. If you steer to the right, the car will go right. If you steer to the left, the car will go left. Human beings are different. Once I told my son, I just decided to test if he's a human being. I said, Paul, I want to test you if you're a human being or not. I said, Paul, can you please say A? He looked at me and said B. And my younger son once, we are parking at a big shopping mall, and there are aisles, and they're all letters. There's aisle A for parking, B, and so we're trying to remember which aisle we are leaving the car. And I'm saying, remember, we are in the aisle F. And my younger son Alex says, but I will remember aisle E. So he is making a different opinion. I said, okay, Alex, you look for our car in aisle E, but I'll look in aisle F. So human beings can disagree, discuss, engage themselves in a dialogue. So we are unique. And this is a very, very important and distinct feature of human beings, because when you take this uniqueness from humans, big tragedies follow. Just a few examples. I come from a country where people believed that we are highly organized animals. And when 1930s came and Joseph Stalin was the chairman of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, anyone who disagreed had only one fate: go to Siberia, and if you disagreed sharply, you would die. And the great author, the Nobel Prize winner Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote a number of novels, Gulag Archipelago, he describes in one of his novels when he was thrown into the forests at night in the freezing snow, and he was tied to a tree, and he was freezing, and the lady officer was torturing him. He asked her, "Why are you doing this to me? Don't you see I'm a human being?" And the lady responded, "Well, when you make an omelette, you need to break some eggs." Joseph Stalin mentioned once that the death of one human being is a tragedy. The death of a million is a statistic. And because human beings in the Soviet Union were viewed merely as animals, highly organized animals, it was possible to actually kill 20 million people in Siberia. There is a road in eastern Siberia, the so-called Eastern Siberian Tract, on which I used to drive many times. In that road alone, 2 million people are buried who built the road. They would build the road, and they would just not to bury them outside and dig graves. They just would put them in the road, put rocks on top, put pavement, and just continue. 2 million people in one road alone. So the theory of evolution is, I've seen the results of it in real life. If people believe in it, and when the people believe that it's a reality, they lose the value of a human soul, that human beings are unique, that every person is an individual, every person is a personality. And I believe that by reading this book, that in the eyes of the Creator, everyone who is present here is more valuable than all the galaxies combined, than all the gold of the world, than all the diamonds. Every person is super duper precious. That's what I believe with all my heart. I don't know if you believe that, but creationism actually elevates human beings and brings them to a high pedestal. And God, of course, risked, because creating the universe full of freedom, he was risking that one day somebody will misuse or abuse the freedom which he gave. And unfortunately, it did happen. We don't know why. But we know about the fact that there was an angel called Lucifer, translated as light bearer, who would later become the devil or the deceiver, and Satan, the adversary. We don't have a lot of description of this story. All we know is that he was the first who decided to rebel against the Creator, who made a perfect universe. Thus says the Lord God, you were the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till, and what word do you find later? Iniquity was found in you. We don't know what was the reason, and we might even never know. But all we know is that his heart was proud because of his beauty. He corrupted his wisdom for the sake of his splendor. So by talking to the king of Tyre, symbolically, the ancient prophet describes the nature of Lucifer. He was extremely proud. And in this context, you find that human beings and robots are different. We have children because we want to love them and be loved. We want to have fellowship. When people ask me a question, Vadim, what is your biggest hobby in life? I tell them my biggest hobby in life is putting my boys to bed in the evening. When in the evening, they are growing up now. One is 10, the other one is 13, but they still behave like little children in the evening. Dad, what about the fairy tale? And they would put me in bed, and I would never, and this is the biggest pleasure, is to hug those two boys. One is on one hand, the other one is on the other hand. They fight a little bit among themselves for the blanket and for the pillow, and then I tell them a story, and I do something for them. That is my biggest pleasure. I love my boys so much. I just want them to know how much I love them. And I tell them this every day. Every time they wake up in the morning, the first thing I tell them, Alex, I want you to know today, I love you so much. And the other boy, Paul, I love you so much. I want my boys to know that I want to love them. And at the same time, it's such a pleasure to have this warm body come back to you and smile at you. And when they wave, when I bid them goodbye at school, they wave to me and say, Dad, I love you. This is so nice. God made the universe to love and be loved. And that's what makes us different from the world of robots and animals. But there was a tragedy, and this tragedy disfigured and marred this all. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, how you are cut down to the ground. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. Above the stars of God I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself, and read the next phrase for me, like the Most High. So the creation wants to become the creator. At first his reasoning seems to be logical. He wants to be better. He wants to upgrade his level of existence. But at the same time he wants to do that with evil means. Now war arose in heaven. 30 years ago, Hollywood made it very popular around the world, the so-called Star Wars. Well, that was the first Star War. Now war arose in heaven. Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. So there was a cosmic battle, and as a result of it, he was cast out from God's presence. By the way, according to the Jewish Bible, there are different parallel realities. And in fact, in the Bible, there are 3 heavens. In the Bible, the first heaven is just the atmosphere, the sky. The second heaven is the cosmos, is the universe that we see with all the stars and galaxies. And there is a third heaven in the Bible, which is a dimension, which is a reality in which God and his angels dwell. So the Bible actually agrees with the opinion of some scientists that our dimension and our reality is not the only one. There are parallel realities, parallel to ours. And sometimes the parallel beings, they would like to relate some important information to us. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So God does not destroy him at once. He gives him an opportunity to display his true character, to show his real nature. And for that reason, he is just isolated. He's quarantined from God's presence, but he still has access to the other worlds. But everywhere he goes around the universe, from galaxy to galaxy, from one planet to another, he received rejection. And the inhabitants of the world have not what? Have not fallen. The universe disagreed with Lucifer. They did not follow him and preferred to stay with God, who is full of love, who loves the universe. They did not follow him, with only one sad exception. And that was what? Planet Earth. That was us. Once there was a day and time when Adam and Eve were created. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and do what? And multiply it, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So God made Adam and Eve, our great grandparents. Now, by the way, a lot of skeptics did not believe that it was possible for all mankind to come from one pair of parents until the discovery of the genetic code of human beings. Now, why do you look like your parents? Tell me, why do you look like your parents or like your neighbor? You look like your parents because you have genes, okay? We're genetically inclined to look similar. And let's say there was a disaster and a big fire, and the human remains are identified with genetic expertise, genetic tests, okay? So genetic disease can be tested. So we are, the whole world is all into genetics today. We have genetically modified foods. We have everything. Now, the genetic code of human beings shows that all mankind came from one pair of parents. In fact, we're all relatives. And if you look at the development of human race and the multiplication of mankind, including all the wars and calamities which happened, you can actually trace back the world's history to the time when there were only 2 humans on planet Earth. And that means, that is great news, because it means that the company of little over 30 people in this hall, you're my relatives. Did you know that you're my relatives? Of course, I may not look exactly as handsome as you are, but you're all my relatives. And this is a beauty of the biblical teaching about mankind. Because in the world, we are dealing with the games of the evil angel. Because there is a problem of racism. Have you heard about the problem of racism? Well, racism is a big problem. When people try to distinguish based on the color of skin. There is the problem of nationalism, or in its acute and extreme form, Nazism, which distinguishing people on the basis of nationality. There are huge problems in the world, and people are fighting each other. Go to Israel, the Jewish people and the Arab people, who are historically brothers, they all come from Abraham, they keep fighting each other. You go to Sri Lanka, you find the Tamil tigers there. You go to Kashmir in India, and you find the collision of India and Pakistan in that territory. You go to Africa, say Rwanda, the tribe of Hutu killing the tribe of Tutsi. Globally, you find so much nationalistic and racial hatred, even in our day and age, even with the development of all technology, even with spacecraft now going almost to Mars, with the internet, with the globalization of human economy, everything. We still have these problems. We still have hatred. And I think this comes because human beings forgot about the true origin of mankind. That we all come from one pair of parents. Of course, we've changed over history. Thousands of years have passed. We had a lot of mutations as humans. We changed the colors of skin, hair, of our height. We all look different today, but we're all relatives. So if anyone accidentally steps on my foot with a sharp heel on your feet, I'll just tell you, don't worry, you're just my relative, it's all right. Or if you were living above me in a multi-apartment house and you accidentally forgot to turn off the tap and all the water came down to my apartment, well, I would still try to put my ends together and tell you, well, my dear relative, why did you flood me? We're all relatives, and I'm so delighted to be in the company of relatives. Well, let's continue. So God blessed them, and He wanted all mankind to develop and multiply. But at the same time, we know that human beings had access not only to supernatural knowledge, but they had access to means of prolonging life. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve had two special trees. One tree was called the tree of life, which enabled human beings to prolong their life indefinitely. The second tree was called the tree of good and evil. It was a tree which would test their loyalty and their allegiance to their Creator. By the way, do you know where most oil comes from in the world? Where do you find most oil? Middle East. In the Middle East. And if you go to Saudi Arabia, and if you go to Iraq and Iran, you find huge reservoirs of rich black oil. There are signs that once upon a time there was a lot of life, because oil is a fossil fuel. It means that there was a lot of life. According to this book, life developed in the Middle East, and the human civilization was born and spread around the globe from the Middle East. And you still find a lot of remains of human life in the Middle East. That's where the Garden of Eden was, where Adam and Eve once lived. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, "You may freely eat of every tree in the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall do what? You shall die." So God said, I made a perfect world for you, but I give you a freedom to choose. So if you choose me, you will live forever. But please don't touch this tree, because there's already evil in the universe. Satan is already up there, and he's going from one galaxy to another trying to tempt them. So the evil is in existence, and God is warning against evil our foreparents, our great-grandparents, Adam and Eve. At first their life was perfect, was peaceful, was calm, was great, until that tragic day when the serpent said to the woman, "Did God say, you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" So Eve on her own is wandering around the Garden of Eden, and she sees a serpent on the tree. Now that serpent, an animal, suddenly starts talking in human language, which was very surprising. But we all know from the book of Revelation that it was the adversary of human beings. It was Satan who spoke with the mouth of this serpent. And the woman said to the serpent, you may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. Now, when you read all these ancient Middle Eastern stories, they look like ancient fairy tales. They are not very scientific in their description. But all of these ancient stories contain important intellectual and spiritual messages in them. Eve says, well, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. But the serpent said to the woman, what did he say? You will not die. And at first he says, did God truly say? He is trying to question God's validity and God's authority. And then he says, you will not die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When he was in heaven, rebelling against God in the first place, he wanted to take his throne. He wanted to take his God's own place. And now he is tempting in the same manner our great-grandma. We don't know what happened in her mind that day. All we know is just a little story about the fall of Adam and Eve. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband, and he ate. So that was the tragedy. And the greatest terrorist of all the universe, Satan, devil, Lucifer, he hijacks this giant spacecraft, planet Earth. He takes over. And it is for this reason that Adam and Eve had to leave their beautiful dwelling. Long before they had children, long before they were to be fruitful and multiply and populate the world, the tragedy was already there. He drove out the man. And at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. God could not perpetuate human suffering and evil, and he could not combine evil and everlasting life, which was granted by the tree of life, which had some supernatural means to renew human cells. And by the way, recently I met with a scientist who is one of the world's leading scientists in genetics, and he tells me, Vadim, we have actually discovered a gene of death. We know that human cells multiply, and they get renewed every so often. Different cells in different periods of time. He says if we could take that gene of death out of human cells, human beings could actually live indefinitely. It is a scientific possibility for human beings to live indefinitely. Of course, it is still possible to kill them if you actually kill the human being, or if that human being falls off a cliff, of a rock or a mountain, and you could still die. But if you take out the gene of death and you take precaution, it is possible to live indefinitely. Somehow the early humans, they had this ability, but they lost it after they had to leave the tree of life, which had supernatural ability to prolong life indefinitely. And ever since that time, you have all these troubles. You have the ocean of evil in this world. It starts with the family, then it reflects on your neighborhood, then it casts upon the society in general, and you have wars, you have conflicts, you have disease, and ultimately you have death, the great separator of all mankind. What is the problem, you'll ask me? What is the root of human suffering? Well, in the New Testament, one of the greatest New Testament authors, a great philosopher and theologian, Paul said, as it is written, there is no one righteous. How many? Not even one. All of human beings are contaminated with the problem of sin. Sin which affects every cell of human body, and your brain and your personality. But your iniquities have separated you from God. So before the fall, human beings could see God and talk to him face to face. But there was something that separated mankind from their Creator. It was their sin and iniquity. Your sins have hidden his face from you so that he will not hear. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people, because all sinned. Now, when I lived in Europe, I loved flying with any airline that comes out of Germany. Now, the Germans, they are great. Technologically, they make the best machines. Actually, many Airbus planes are actually built in Germany today. And I loved flying Lufthansa Airlines. I like flying German Wings and other airlines from Germany because they're reliable, the pilots are great. But I still remember, like 3 years ago, there was a flight by German Wings from Spain to Germany. And the pilots waited until his captain went to the toilet, then he locked the door, and then he committed what we call an extended suicide. Do you remember that day? When he initiated the plane's computer to land into a mountain. Even the highly technological plane could not avoid this accident, and 180 precious people got killed in that accident. One man makes a mistake, one man makes a violation of the law, and everybody dies. That's what happened with Adam and Eve, to you and me. Adam and Eve, they sinned like the pilot and the co-pilot of this big giant airplane called human civilization. Because they drove the plane into the mountain, all mankind died with them. And that is why we all get sick and die. So the root of human suffering is the problem of sin. It's worse than cancer. It is worse than AIDS. It's worse than any disease on planet Earth. But you will ask a question, but what is the Creator's response to all this? Well, you find these words in the New Testament of the Jewish Bible. For God is what? Love. This is a brilliant phrase, because where else will you find this simple clause, this simple sentence on this planet? Look at the fairy tales of most nations of the world. Where else will you find this statement? God is love. In actual fact, the Jewish Bible is the only book you find in the ancient world which makes this bold statement. God is love. He actually loves mankind. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. He expresses his love to mankind by sending his own part, his Son, to this world so that he could live among human beings and show humans his personality. He was to be tempted, just like Adam was to be tempted. And you remember the words of the great tempter in the desert, all this will I give you if you will bow down and worship me. Jesus said to him, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And at the end of his life, he would die on the cross. And as the Jewish Bible says, he would die not just because the Roman soldiers and the Jewish rabbis hated him, but he died actually for the sins of mankind. Now, all these things were very stunning to me as a teenager when I was growing up in the former Soviet Union. And I still remember what happened to me once, to me and my cousin, when we passed by a rubbish dump and we saw a little radio set. So we took that radio set and we brought it home, and as children we were curious, we disassembled it and reassembled, and it played only once. Now, we never realized, the Soviet children, that the Soviet Union had a lot of radio blockers around its borders so that no programs from the West would ever penetrate. It is for this reason that many Soviet citizens would rise at 4 o'clock in the morning because that's when the KGB was asleep and they could listen to some radio programs coming from the West, like the Voice of America. And somehow we caught a program which was talking about the personality of Jesus Christ. And in that program it said, I remember only one sentence, Jesus healed people because he loved them so much. And when I heard this, I told, and then the radio set broke again. We tried to fix it. No success. We threw it back in the rubbish dump. There was no way we could fix the broken radio. But I remembered one sentence. He healed people because he loved them so much. I actually told my cousin, I wish I could learn to love people, to actually give them a miracle healing. Because I read in fairy tales about the magicians who could cure people, who could make miracles, move mountains. And I thought that Jesus Christ was one of those many magicians. But for me, this magician was unique because he cured people because he did what? He loved them so much. That was stunning. And that painted in my mind of an atheist boy, of a child who never saw anything spiritual in his life before, who was very curious about science. I loved scientific approaches. I used to win lots of competitions in mathematics, in biology, in English, in history, and others. My school used to send me at every possible competition under the sun, which was relating to any of the sciences. But suddenly I realized there's one more science. There is the science of love. And so in my atheistic mind, this person who lived 2,000 years ago, even if everything he said was false, he was a very nice man. And that's what I could not ignore, and that's what I could not deny. He was a very nice man. And as a very nice man who lived 2,000 years ago, he died on the cross for human beings. And he's shown the whole universe that devil was a murderer from the beginning. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. And by the way, there is a lot of spiritual deception in the world today. No wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as, could you read it for me? As an angel of light. There is a lot of deception, so there needs to be some point of reference where you can verify whether what you're hearing is true or false, whether it's right or wrong. Well, the ancient Jewish Bible proclaims, I made a fire come out of you, and it consumed you, and I reduced you to ashes on the ground in the sight of all who were watching. So the Jewish Bible actually says that one day Jesus Christ will come back to this world, and he will destroy evil completely. It'll be a catastrophic change, but it'll be a positive change in the history of mankind. But while we're here still walking the journey of life, he wants to approach us and engage himself in a relationship with you and me. And so he says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and do what? And help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So actually it's not humans who are approaching him, it's him who is approaching us. And he says, do not fear, do not be dismayed. I will strengthen you, I will help you. In the other text you find these beautiful words, turn to me and be what? And be saved, all the ends of the earth, for I am God and there is no other. Suddenly, in the midst of this topic, you find a truth about the greatest personality in the universe. So let me summarize. At the beginning we mentioned about scientists talking about the possibility of life in other worlds. And even if only one planet in one galaxy is populated, it means there are millions of inhabited worlds. Well, the Jewish Bible said this 2,000 years ago. In this book you find a number of texts which mention that there are people in other worlds. Now, what about the UFOs? Now, there are unidentified flying objects. There is one strange thing about the unidentified flying objects. They look very secretive, they appear and disappear, and they do not engage in a very good communication pattern with human beings. Which brings to me a question, are they the true aliens? Because I think if they were the true inhabitants of other worlds who are created in God's image and likeness, they would be friendly and they would actually try to communicate with us directly. So in my mind, the UFOs, the unidentified flying objects, are the games of the fallen angel who is trying to play games with mankind, trying to draw us away from the Creator. So this is my opinion, okay? You may have your own. Remember, what I'm sharing with you is only what I suggest to you as a lesson, as a seminar, but you are to make up your own minds, okay? Thirdly, I believe that we are not alone, that there are parallel dimensions. This reality is not the only reality. There are other realities. And 2,000 years ago in the Jewish Bible, they say the ancient people said the same thing, that this world was not the only one. In fact, in the Bible, there are three heavens. There's the atmosphere, there's the universe, and there is the third heaven where God himself abides. And the authors who wrote this book believed that they received this knowledge not just from this earth, but from the parallel dimension, from a parallel reality. It's a supernatural book. And they had supernatural knowledge. Fourth, we mentioned about human experience in times past, and even in present times, when people declare that they have a communication with some supernatural forces. In recent times, some people are saying, well, I'm receiving information from cosmos, from space. In the biblical times, they said we communicated with the angels. They had a similar stories in Buddhism, in Islam, in Judaism, or most pagan religions around the world. To summarize this, I believe that God and his angels historically were very active trying to help human beings. And at the same time, the angels of evil were also very active to engage in communication with human beings and drive them away from their creator. So there is a possibility of such supernatural communication. And all of these things are not only mentioned by modern scientists today, these things were mentioned in biblical prophecies 2,000 years ago. But what is my conclusion? What shall I do as I walk the journey of this life? Now that I realize that there is a great controversy between good and evil, between Christ and Satan around us, what shall I do? Well, I decided in my life, when I was a teenager, that I will choose this Creator who is full of love. I decided to be on his side. I want to be on the side of good things. I want to do good to humans and to my children, to my family, to my society, to my community. I want to be on this side. Because I realize that there's another side. There's a side of evil. There's a side of bad things. And there's the side where Lucifer is the king. And every human being on this planet, whether you want it or not, cannot stay on the neutral ground, because the neutral ground does not exist. There is only two sides. One side is the side of good, and the other side is the side of bad. My question is, which side do you want to be on? There's silence. Well, I think Australians want to be on the side of good, do you? Okay. Now, one more question I will ask you. Would you like, if God exists, would you like him to protect you from evil and from dangers of this life? Would you like that? Could I see the hands of those who want God to be protective of your lives? I want him to protect me, and I want him to protect you. It is possible. If you restore a vertical link, a broken link, which was severed in human relationships, which separated mankind, separated from the Creator. But if you restore this broken link, you'll find satisfaction, you'll find peace, you will find emotional well-being, you will see a huge upgrade in the quality of your life. Well, I'm concluding now, and before we hear the final announcements, will you mind if I just say just a few words to this Creator to ask him to give you his benefit and his provision. Dear Creator, today I'm asking on behalf of this beautiful audience that you will take care of them, that you will provide for their needs, that you will protect them from all the dangers that could come, that you will make them happy and satisfied. And also, I'm asking you on behalf of this amazing, wonderful country of Australia, that you will look after this land. Amen. Well, thank you very much. You're a brilliant audience. I'll see you on Wednesday. 300 prophecies fulfilled at the same time. We're going to actually explore 12 amazing predictions which were recorded several thousand years ago. We'll talk about a man who wrote his life story long before he was born. It'll be an amazing prophetic journey. We're going to look at the history of the Middle East. We'll travel to Israel. We'll go to Syria. We're going to go to Jordan. We're going to go to many Middle Eastern countries. It'll be an amazing journey. But in the meantime, Peter, thank you very much. And thank you, my dear participants. Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Do you think that it was appropriate that we had our seminar family announcement today when you heard what Vadim said? We are all family together, aren't we? And that's so. I don't believe things happen by chance. No. It's a pleasure to see you, and I know, as I look around the room, I see many people smiling. That's good. I take it then that if you're smiling, you've enjoyed what you've heard. It's a pleasure to share with you. We have some refreshments for you. But before we conclude, you might notice Enrique sitting here behind his TV screen. This is being broadcast live on Facebook. And when I asked a few moments ago, there were people watching. So in addition to you, there are other people watching wherever they are in the world. And there was when we looked at the moment, or just before, Callum told me there was 126 people that had viewed the site. Some had stayed, some hadn't stayed all of the time, but there were people who were sharing. So that means now that it's on Facebook, if you miss a night and you would like to catch up with what you've missed, you can go to Facebook and what you've missed is there. We have a website called morningtonpeninsula.sda.org that will connect you with the Facebook page, and you can watch the programs that have been transmitted already. So if you miss a night, you can catch up with it via Facebook. And if you want that address, we'll give it to you. We'll make a little card and give it to you next week, or next time you come on Wednesday, all right? Thank you, my friends. It's a pleasure. You are my family, the seminar family, but the human family. We're family together. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.